Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Rabbi Adam Kligfeld's weekly Rashi study class.
Hello to whoever might be listening to this on the Temple Beth Am podcast. Here we go. This, depending on how quickly we go today, this is going to be a lot of Rashi grammar and vocab and bringing us to other places in Tanakh where roots are used in this similar way. So this is going to be, again, depending on how quick we go, low-ish on content and high-ish on grammar, but because there are two long Rashis about that, and then eventually we'll get over that hump and get more to the story. We are on chapter 9, verse 16, which Rashi was quiet on. If I remember correctly, I think we read Sforno on that last week. Let's read. Yeah, we'll read the verse. Good morning, Joel. Just to get into the rhythm. Ulam ba'avor zot hematicha. This is God. This is what God wants Moses to say to Pharaoh. So we're still in that extended quotation marks. He wants to say to him, "Ba'avor zot hematicha. This it's for this reason that I've let you stand. I have upheld you. Ba'avor harotcha et kochi. In order for me to show you my power. Ulaman saper shemi b'chol haaretz, and in order to that my name be reported and told throughout the entire land." We didn't read this inside last time, but Ibn Ezra makes it clear that lest you think that the saper is a continuation of the you. In order, Pharaoh, that you aggrandize my name throughout the land. It's not tisaper, it's saper almost as an infinitive. And in order that the telling of my name happens throughout the land, right? I'm not expecting you to go be my missionary, but news will be spread about what happened here, okay? And Sforno, just to remind you, we're not going to read it again, he basically responds to some of the questions that I know at least Elon asked last time and other people were as well, which is, gosh, how do we relate to this God who seems to be toying with, yes, a tyrant, but seems to be specifically interested in ongoing suffering. And Sforno reminds us that sometimes the next round of travail is to induce tshuva, right? So that you might repent, in which case all this will be done. And we discussed how very much on the nose this is, the amount of havoc that Israel is creating right now in Gaza. And I think one of the most salient responses I've heard from many people is, right, it sort of could all be over very quickly if the tyrants in the situation decided to change their ways, right? So this is Sforno saying this is not God intentionally trying to torture the Egyptians, but saying perhaps if I push you this far, you'll repent, and then all of this will become much more easy. Okay, that's where we ended, and that was a nice ending because it ends the 6th aliyah of Va'era. It's taken us a long time to get through Va'era. We now begin the 7th aliyah. I don't remember how long the 7th aliyah is. Not that long. My guess is by Pesach we should be finished with it. Pesach's not that far away, so okay. Verse 17. I don't know. Carol, do you want to read?
Maybe next.
Okay. Marcia, you want to read?
Marshall.
Yep. Thank you. So 17 starts with Odecha mistolel be'ami levilti shalacham, and alters, you still block the way to my people, not sending them off.
Good. Okay. Let's break it down. In Hebrew, ode can be declined, right? In English, the word more, you can't do a declension of the word more because it's just it's an adverb, the word more, right? But in Hebrew, ode can be odi, my ode, odcha, your mooring, your continuing, right? So it's sort of an implied, and as long as you continue, I know it's not written in there, but as long as you continue, mistolel ba'ami, and we'll discuss first, and discuss what that is. The root of mistolel is samech lamed lamed. The taf gets thrown into the middle of the root. So we'll discuss what that is, but as long as you mistolel ba'ami, levilti shalcham, to not send them to refuse to send them away. This is what we'd call like a clause in modern English. It's not a full sentence, right? There's almost like an implied if, but we don't have the then. The then, just to peek ahead, is the beginning of verse 18. I'm going to send hail upon you. So in biblical grammar, it's a full pasuk. In English grammar, we would send it back to the person who wrote it saying this is a sentence fragment, not a full sentence, okay? As long as you mistolel ba'ami. Okay, mistolel. Let's look at unclus, okay? Ad ka'an at kveshat bei ba'ami. Sa'ad ka'an, as long as, ata, you, kveshat. So the Aramaic kveshat, from the root kaf beit shin. Anyone think of a word in Hebrew, kaf beit shin?
Kibush,
What does kibush mean?
like to
Conquer,
conquer, right?
Right, kibush haaretz, it describes what Joshua does in the book of Joshua to conquer the land of Canaan. So here it has to do with a conquering. Does anyone know of another Hebrew word or root? What's that? Like sheep? Sin shin. I know there's somewhat interchangeable. I'm not sure there's a connection there. Going back to the original Hebrew, salal. Samech lam lam. Anyone have any connections with that?
Misilah is a path.
Right. If you've seen any construction project in Israel, Solel Boneh, right? It's like the national, I think it's like a nationalized construction company. And Solel Boneh it's basically a, someone trying to get into the Zoom? Oh, sorry. Solel Boneh, wait till they join. Sorry to those who are in the waiting room. I wasn't looking for a few minutes. My apologies. Solel Boneh is basically a construction firm using two biblical roots, meaning to build. Solel is to like flatten the path upon it, right? So that's the two ways that you do build a road. You flatten it and then you build it. Okay. So can we connect those two ideas? That Onkelos translates to a word that means a conquering. And yet Solel seems to do with the pre-building process. Can anyone draw a line between those two things? Real question, not rhetorical. How do we make sense of that? So the word is odcha mistolel ba'ami. As long as you solel or engage in silila with my people, Onkelos translates it from a root that means to conquer, but solel we think of as a word means to kind of flatten a road before building it. Tova, let's get our microphone. No. Here, bring it off the stand.
I guess you can think of conquest as a kind of flattening. You're going in, you're knocking down all resistance. You're preparing it for yourself to be able to build in that place.
Yeah, and I think even in colloquial English, we can sometimes talk about a military operation as just flattening the opposition, right? So your first glance is like building project and warfare don't seem to be similar, but the idea is to take something that is in your way, something convex, and flatten it down. And now that you've flattened it down, now you can continue to build up upon that. Marshall?
Yeah, like the word maslul, I think, which means a path. That there's something which is blocking. Therefore, I'm going to create a path.
Correct. So a creation of a path. So if we push that back into our verse, something like, as long as you continue to knock us down, as you block us or you prevent us from coming out, if you get in the way of our making our own path and not send them away, something like that. That's one way of understanding mistolel. Let's look at Rashi. Okay.
Before we do Rashi, could I just give Alter's comment on that?
Yeah, please.
Alter says, you still block the way to my people. The meaning of the Hebrew verb here, mistolel, has long been in dispute. This translation presumes a connection with the military term solelah, a siege ramp, which might imply that Pharaoh is keeping the Hebrews penned in as a besieging army would do to the population trapped within a city.
Open up my window in the bed, please.
Like the
Bring his food down when you come
get
down.
to a higher thing so that you can conquer it. Yeah.
Maybe to go over a wall. If
Yeah.
there's fortification.
Tova, microphone.
Yeah, I just had a question. Silberman translates our problematic verb as exalteth thyself. Where do you think he derived that from?
He translates the word mistolel that way.
Apparently, yeah, as yet, and yet exaltest thou thyself against my people, that thou wilt not let them go.
Let's wait for Rashi.
Okay.
So my guess is that Silverman sometimes translates the verse as if Rashi's commentary were pshat. So let's read the Rashi and we'll get close to that. Okay, Marshall.
So Odecha mistalel be'ami ketargumo. That we are to understand it as the, I guess, Targum Onkelos
Correct.
understands it. Gvishat be'ami. That, like he says, still oppressing my people.
Right, flattening, conquering my people, okay?
V'hu mikizrat, and this is from the,
We would use the word shoresh. Rashi uses the word gizra to use the word shoresh, the root. From what Hebrew word is this from?
Misilah, not taken out of Isaiah, chapter 11, verse 16.
You have Isaiah?
Yeshaya.
I have Bamidbar 2019. Let me put that on the screen. I wonder if there's two different verses that are being potentially discussed here. Elon, will you do your thing? Okay. So, chapter 20 of the book of the Midbar, verse 19. It's listed at verse 19, but it's actually verse 20. I guess there's a disagreement as to what verse it's from. So start with verse 19. Vayomer Elav Edom. This is when the Israelites are traveling through the desert and they try to pass through the territory of Edom, and the king of Edom doesn't let them. So Edom said back to them, Lo Tabor, you cannot pass. Almost sounds Monty Pythonish. None shall pass. Pein Bacherev Etzeh Likradcha, or I'm going to come out and greet you by the sword. Vayomru Elav, this is verse 20, and they said back to him, Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, B'mesilah na'aleh. We're not going to bother you. We're going to stay on the highway. We're going to stay on the road. Mesilah. So for the rest of the verse doesn't really matter. And look at the right side of the page. How does Onkelos translate Mesilah there? Ba'orech kvisha. Like a flattened, paved highway. Meaning we're not going to go into your territory. We're not going to go into your farms or your habitations. We're just going to basically use the highway, or the byway. Very good, a kvish. I hadn't even thought about that. Very good, Joel. I don't know why that had not come to me. Very good, a kvish, right? A flattened pathway. We're not going to get in your way. So Rashi says it's just like that usage there in Bamidbar, a flattening, and as long as you continue to flatten my people the way road builders would flatten land to make a road, then you're going to be in trouble. Okay, keep going,
Okay.
Marshall.
Targuminan, as we translate, Orach Kavisha, Uvla as Kalkir.
Kalkie. Okay.
Well, it's interesting that Silberman translates that or pronounces it as Kosher, Caucher. Why he does that, I don't know.
I don't know enough French to know. We'll hopefully get some help from Rosemary, but look at the screen. So this is Otsar Laze Rashi, entry number 3082, Mistolel. So it's transliterated from French into Hebrew as Kuf Lamed Kuf Yud Yud Reish Kalkie, and this guy creates the French word in English letters Chalchier. I looked that up, I could find nothing, but his understanding of what the word means is mashma'ut rishonesh shel milah. The initial meaning of the root was lidroch, to stomp, lirmos, to trample, uvahashala, and it got borrowed from that root to mean lidakeh, to kind of depress, lirdof, to pursue. Okay, can you think of any French word, Rosemary, this might be?
I just think of
Let's get her a microphone.
No, it has nothing to do probably with calcare. Is the residue which stays like in a tube or somewhere, like plaster, not plaster,
but no verb having to do to stomp or to flatten or anything like that. Okay, Rick, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you. So lidroch, I can see derech there, right? So if you're stomping along, then you make a road. The derech comes from
Correct.
lidroch.
Correct.
So the next one was lirmos. Is remes? Is remes the same thing, or is that totally different? The next word on your page there after lidroch, the French.
Yeah, lirmos means to stomp over or to trample. It can also mean to slither, because that's what a snake does in Breshit. Haromes ala aretz.
Ah, okay, that's what I heard. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm not sure what French word is being referred to, but clearly, Uncleus thinks it's a French word that is going to prove the point that this means to kind of to flatten out. Okay. Now, remembering what Tova said before, keep reading, Marshall.
Okay. Uchvar pe Rashi v'sof vayhi miketz, and I've already explained it at the end of Parshat vayhi miketz. Kol teva shetchilat yisoda samech, v'hi ba'al l'davar b'lashon mitpa'el, noten hatav shel shamush. Shimush, is it? Okay. Be'emtza otiot shel ikar.
Okay. This is Rashi, like using medieval Hebrew to describe a certain phenomenon when it comes to the order of letters and roots. Okay.
Okay, now I'm just going to read the Silberman translation, since I would struggle to try to translate individually. So that in the case of every word, or here he says the word yisoda means verb, whose first root letter is samech or shin, when it is intended to express the idea of acting upon itself.
Meaning a hitpa'el, the
Hitpa'el
reflexive.
form. One puts the tav of the prefix heat or meat or yeet between the root letters, just as in this case.
Okay, let me try to say that a little bit more cleanly. So Hebrew letters are 3 letters. God, it is really hot in here. I just don't understand what's going on.
Emphasize.
Here?
Always complain it's too hot. He comes in here when the door's open.
But also the word sometimes is different than by
We'll edit this out in post-production.
By the way, Joel was a wonderful MC with a
He was the second best Joel MC of all time. Thank you.
Okay.
Behind Joel Gray, obviously.
So think of a 3-letter root. How about lavash, right, to get dressed, or the notion of clothing. When you put it in reflexive, it's the beginning of lehit, and then the root lehit labesh, to do it to yourself. Pashat means to strip. Lehit pashet means to take off your own clothing, to strip your clothing, etc. Almost all the time, the part that makes it into a reflexive, the lahit, comes first and then the root. But depending on what letter the root begins with, something else happens. And when a root begins with a samech or a zayin or a tzadi, and I'll show you examples in a second, the taf of the reflexive gets put in between the first and the second letter. I'll give you an example. So, what's the root for old? Zakein. Right. To age oneself is not it's not lehit zakein, it's lehiz. The zayin comes first. Here's actually another it's a dalid, not a tuf when it's a zayin, so it's lehiz dakein. So the root is interrupted. What's pain? Tsa'ar. To be pain that you cause someone sorrow, to apologize or to be sorrowful, is lehitz ta'er. It's not lehit tsa'ar, but the taf gets in between the first and second letter of the root. Okay? Correct. And a tzadi becomes a tet. So I use 2 examples where it's true that there's a letter that interrupts, but it's a different letter, right? And with a samech, if a samech root is in the hitpa'el, lehistakel, right? Or lehistaper to get a haircut. So sapar means to cut hair. It's not lehit saper, it's lehistaper. Why? Excellent question. Wait, hold on.
I mean, this is not at all my area, but I know at least in some tav has been pronounced as an S, and so it makes sense if it was pronounced with an S sound that you wouldn't want it to run into a root that also begins with S and therefore juxtapose it.
I'm certain it does have to do with pronunciation.
Mm-hmm.
The actual origin story of that switcheroo, I have no idea. Like, it probably happened so early on in the development of the language that there's no record of it. But it's pretty consistent, right? So that's what he's talking about there, right? Notain hataf shel shimush be'emtza ha'otiyot shel ikar. That the tuf that's being used for the part of the root to reflexify it goes in between be'emtza ha'otiyot shel ikar, the letters of the root. Kagon, keep going. Like our case, yeah. Now, what Rashi is about to do, I will say I don't quite understand, because this, I didn't check, this can't be the first time in the Tanakh that you have a root that begins with a samach that's in a hitpa'el. Maybe it is, I don't know. But he's going into this as if he's in, like, teaching grammar 101 and just showing us three random, and they're really random roots throughout the Tanakh where this phenomenon happens. It's a pretty basic thing to explain. Why he's spending time on it, I'm not sure, but I want to show you all the examples just because we're being comprehensive here. So hold on one second.
These are obviously well-known verses.
You say that facetiously? Okay. So I'm going to share the screen. The first one is from Kohelet. Okay. Uchagon vayistabel hechagav. Okay, so look at the screen. This is from the 12th chapter, the last chapter of Kohelet, verse 5. Gam migavoa yira'u. People that when you're afraid of heights. I always have a hard time pronouncing this word, even when I'm laning Kohelet. V'chat chatim baderech, and frightening things on the way. Is it a coincidence or not a coincidence that this root has the word derech, which is the synonym solel? Probably coincidence. Vayina eitz hashaked, and almond trees are blossoming. Vayistabel hechagav, and the grasshopper is like suffering and dragging itself off. In the root vayistabel, the root is samech bet lamed, sabal, but the taf gets in between. It's not vayit sabel, but vayis tabel. Okay? Look at the next one. The next one he brings from, keep reading, Marshall. So he says, migizrat saval, it's for the root saval. Okay?
Kitis tarer alenu, from Bamidbar Tetvav Yud Gimel.
Okay, look at the screen. This is from the Korach story. When verse 13, Hama'at ki helitanu me eretz zavar chalav v'dvash. It's not only did you bring us out from the Egypt, which they believed was flowing with milk and honey, lahamitenu bamidbar, to kill us in the desert. Ki tistarer alenu gam histarer. Are you really going to lord over us? The root from which we get the root tistarer is sar or sarar, to lord over something. The taf gets in between the sin and the reish, and in biblical grammar, the samech and the sin are somewhat interchangeable. So even though he's trying to make a claim about the samech and he's using a root that's a sin, for him it's basically the same thing. It's the S sound, which probably pushes closer to Tova's understanding this is a pronunciation thing, right? That it's hard, however they pronounce these letters, and we don't know exactly how they did, it made it easier to pronounce it if you inverted the taf and the samech. I see Larry's hand is raised, so let's stop for a second and hear what Larry has to say.
I'm sorry I was late, so you probably already covered a lot of this already. First of all, did you mention the reference to the first verse of the Haftarah for Yom Kippur? Solo.
Solo Hamsila, right. We didn't reference it, but it's the same root, to pave the pathway for God, right.
And then I didn't catch what you were talking about in terms of Old French, but the word pave itself is a word that comes from French, from paver, which means to pave, but it also means, according to
Hold on 1 second. Can someone just make the volume louder? I don't know if it's on the computer.
It's the air conditioning.
I know.
How about now? Is that better?
Okay, keep going.
So my etymological dictionary tells me that pave comes from the Old French pavé or Latin paver, which means to beat, to ram, to tread down. So it literally means the translation that JPS gives, which is to, I'm sorry, no, it's not the Rashi translation of beating down. So paving means not just paving with stone or with paving blocks, but also means to beat down.
Yes. So, and we danced around that a little bit. This idea that even though we don't naturally think of like a building process and conquering to be in the same realm of meaning, it really is. It's a beating down, a flattening, a paving, so that you can then build something on top of that. Yeah. Joanna.
So I think the reason that Rashi feels the need to dwell so much on this is it's not clear to me if this is the first time we have a hit pa'el with the samech. But as we've been talking, I've looked up the shoresh in a concordance, and this is the one and only appearance of this shoresh in all of Torah. So I'm guessing that Rashi felt a need, although as Larry just referenced, it does appear literally a handful of times elsewhere in Tanakh, including the Haftarah that Larry referenced. This is the one and only appearance of this shoresh in Torah, and Rashi probably feels the need to explain it.
Good. So it might indeed be a hapax legomenon. It's only the time that it appears. It's interesting to me, and I can't solve this in my head, why he gives so many examples. And yes, from random seeming places, but maybe this is indeed the first time like he comes across this, and he wants to make sure that we never are confused by this in the future. Joel, let's give Joel the microphone.
If it's like Larry says, that this isn't a published work by Rashi, but it's actually notes by his students, maybe, he's just responding to questions. So one of his students may have asked, what does that word mean? And he says, well, it's samach lama lama. And he says, well, why is there a taf in the middle? And so just like you would do, he says, well, it happens all the time. And he goes, oh, pretty good.
Interesting. So like imagining this as just a recording of what happened when Rashi's teaching the material. Nice. That's great. Nice. Okay, we're almost done with this Rashi. I think there's a few more.
Okay, so Mikizrat, Nagid, Visar, I guess from the verbal pattern.
From the root sar, which he's reminding us means nagid, some kind of dignitary. Right. Okay.
Mistakel havet.
Okay.
And then that's unkelos, which is I was considering from the root samech chaf lamed to reflect on.
Right. So he decides to go as obscure as possible and bring us to an Aramaic verse in the book of Daniel. So I bring it onto the screen. So, Daniel is an inscrutable text because it's half Hebrew, half Aramaic. Mistakal hevit bekarnaya. I considered the horns. Forget the context of that. This is the word lehistakel, to look at, right? We know that word in modern Hebrew, and it's not lehit sakel, but lehis takel. So yet another example where an S-sounding letter, samech or sin, gets removed from the second two letters of its root. The tuf gets in between. That's how it gets hitpa'elized. Tova, I misremembered. It's not Rashi that brings the question, the notion of the root meaning to lord over. It's Everett Fox's translations. I want to share that with you. And why, I'm not sure. But let me show you Everett Fox's translation. Okay, it's on the screen. So, And if, no, that's Corin. Maybe it's Corin, not Ever Fox. Corin reads it as if as yet thou dost exalt thyself against my people so as not to let them go. And Rashi, sorry, not Rashi, Everett Fox is, I'm not as quick today with my clicking. Yeah, Everett Fox says the same thing. If you set yourself up over my people, but not setting them free, right? I don't know. I don't know why that root might mean that. Leonard?
Well, there's a word salseo, which means to exalt.
Actually, I'm not thinking straightly today because I did look this up. Look at the screen. I had this on the computer. I had forgotten what I had forgotten. So if you look up the root salal in the BDB, it means to lift up and to cast up, right? It believes that the word sulam, ladder, is related to that idea, right? Silsul, a loftiness or distinction. So BDB would say to Rashi, you're too influenced by Onkelos, who read it as a conquering, a flattening. The root has a perfectly good meaning, which means to lift yourself up over, not to flatten us. And that's what's going on here. Leonard and then Barry.
If you look at the second line from the bottom there on that article, where it says Pilpil, Salsala, that's the same thing. Exalt her.
Right. And if you look at the bottom part, he actually gives us a jackpot here. In the heat poel, mistolel, our verse, exalt oneself. And to exalt yourself against. Now, they're cousins, right? So to exalt yourself against means to make you higher than them. It means for you to be big, them to be small. It means to flatten on some level. So it's not that these are two different possible roots. It's just two different ways of rendering it and thinking about it. Is the focus here God saying to Moses to tell Pharaoh, if you continue to hold yourself up here and us down here? Or is it more if you continue to block their pathway out? Either way, we know what he's trying to say. If you remain stubborn, you're going to get hail. Yeah.
So just a short comment here. I remember reading that this metathesis, the switching of the letters, the order of the letters, is exceedingly rare as a feature of a language. Apparently, this is like one of the only languages in the whole world that uses that feature as part of the grammar of the language, as opposed to, occasionally things switch by accident.
Interesting. I remember when I first learned it, I was gobsmacked. I was like, first of all, it explained why certain words were what they were, right? I knew the verb lihiz dakain before I realized that it's from zakain. I knew it. I knew how to say a sentence. Anihiz dakanti. I got older, but I hadn't thought about what happened to the root zakan. The dalet got in there, so I only learned the grammar after I learned how to speak, which is in most cases in Hebrew. In my Hebrew, it's the reverse. I learned the grammar and then I spoke it. But if you are a native Hebrew speaker, like a 5-year-old knows how to say, I need nizdakein, I'm getting older, but is not thinking about the placement of the daled between the zayin and the kuf. And once you learn it, words begin to open up. Yeah. Barry, then Marshall, and Joanna, is your hand up again or still? While you're answering that, Barry, go ahead.
Sorry, not me. Yeah, you said from before.
Okay. Barry.
Just a simple physics, to push up requires a pushing down. To raise up requires a pushing down.
Yes, correct. So either way you go on this, it's clear that what Pharaoh is being accused of is keeping him up and the people down. Rick? Oh, no, Marshall and then Rick.
I'm remembering back from the book of Genesis about Joseph's hair. Was that Misalsel Se'arot? He was, in fact, beautifying his hair, doing something with his hair, the same shoresh. Do I remember correctly?
In what context?
I don't remember.
Like a rabbinic text? Or in the Torah itself?
In the Torah itself, Misalsel Se'arot, I think it was.
Doesn't ring a bell.
I'm misremembering.
I don't think that is from chapter 39. I don't think that's in the story of him and Potiphar's wife. Yeah. There might be a rabbinic commentary on that.
Rebbe.
Yeah, it's not. So a misalsel se'ar is a hair straightener in modern Hebrew. Look what happens when you Google that phrase. Look. That's a misalsel se'ar. Is curling irons? Yeah. No, I think it's a straightener. No. Yeah. Yeah. I don't remember a text about that with Yosef, but do some research.
Rebbe. Hello.
Yes, Rick.
I think that's the midrash where Joseph is looking in the mirror and he sees the image of his father. Maybe that's when he was looking at his hair. Okay.
Yeah.
But to answer Marshall, but I wanted to ask, when you had the definition up there from the BDB or whatever, in the middle you had, it was derech lo slula. You had derech again a couple of times. So I really latched onto that a path that you keep walking on, it's get flatter and flatter. And then I wanted to bring up, if I could, the distinction or the difference between 16 and 17. In 16, you have them standing up, he'ematicha, and now you're flattening them down. So I think there's a direction, there's a directionality of what the people are experiencing also.
Very good. And if you look at the first word beginning at verse 18, it's hineni mamtir, I'm bringing down upon you. So I think that's nice, Rick, this idea of plotting the up and downness of this stretch of verses. I don't think there's an accident. Good. Okay, that's the end of Rashi on that verse, and that's the end of that verse, and that verse is a half thought because it's really an ellipsis leading into what God is telling Moses to tell Pharaoh that God promises to do if Pharaoh doesn't mend his ways. Okay, now verse 18. Elon, you want to read verse 18? Sure. Let's give him a microphone.
One's good. Hineni mamtir ke'et macha barad kaved ma'od asher lo haya kamohu b'Mitzrayim lemin hayom havista va'ad ata.
Okay, see if you can translate.
Here at this time tomorrow, there will be a heavy hail, a very heavy hail, that you have not seen anything like it in Egypt from the time of its founding until now.
Good. So mamtir, you see in the root mamtir, matar, which means rain, right? So rain here in the Hebrew and English double entendre. Rain is the thing that comes down. It also means to rain something down means to bring something from up and bring it down, whether the thing that's being brought down is actually rain, right? Tain talo matar, right, to give dew and rain, but lahamtir can also just mean to bring down precipitation or bring down something else. So I will be bringing down ka'et machar. What are some ways to render those two words? Ka'et machar. We know machar means tomorrow. What's the ka'et? Okay, so we know that it means at about this time. The problem is that there seems to be a word in Hebrew missing, because what you have in 8 is time, but you don't have the word this. You have, it's almost as if it's, behold, I'm going to rain down at time tomorrow. And both in Hebrew and in English, there's some kind of an article or a defining word that is missing. Ka'et machar, at time tomorrow, at this time tomorrow. Norm, if you're going to speak, you need a microphone.
But their Masoretes have given us not ka'es, but ka'es at the time.
Yeah.
Or this time.
Yeah. So look at Onkelos. Onkelos recognizes what's kind of missing in the verse. Ha ana machet mitra. I'm going to bring down from the sky. Ba'idana, at time, hadain. He adds in the hadain, which means hazeh, because he knows that even with the ka'et, there's some other word that's missing. That this time, machar, tomorrow, barda, the hail. Okay, and it's very, very strong. Asher lo haya chamohu b'Mitzrayim. There was never hail like this in Egypt. Lemin hayom, from today, Limin Hayom Hivazda, from the day of its having been established. What's the root of Hivazda? Yud Samach Daled. Remember that? That's going to be Rashi's next foray into what happens when the first letter of a root is a Samach. That was last time. What happens when the first letter of a root is a Yud? The Yud disappears from this root, but we have that all the time, like Yom Huledet, right? The root of Yom Huledet is Yud Lamed Daled, but the Yud disappears in many forms, right? But the root here is Yasad or Yisod, to establish. V'ad ata, until now. Okay. Questions or comments on the verse in either content or form? Elon.
Yeah, I'm curious as to why it needs to say at this time tomorrow. Why didn't it just say, behold, tomorrow? I mean, what's the significance of the time?
Good. So Rashi will pick up on that if we're supposed to understand from Ka'et is not just generally it's coming soon, but it's 3:29 right now, and it's going to be, we're going to do this at 3:29 tomorrow. What does that mean? So Rashi is going to reply to that. Whether you like his response or not, we'll see, but he's sensitive to that. Anything else on the verse itself? Marshall, let's give him a microphone.
Again, alters translation from the day of its founding until now. As the plagues are intensified, rhetorical drum rolls such as this punctuate the report of the catastrophes. Compare verse 24, the like of which there had not been in all the land of Egypt from the time it became a nation.
So what do you think he means by drum roll there?
Getting louder and louder, getting more intense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's as if like the warning when this plague is coming is heading into epic, right? It's not just that bad things are coming. You're about to experience something that your society has never experienced. I just want to share with you Everett Fox's translation, who translates in English in a way that suggests that he also believes that there's something a little bit lacking in the Hebrew. Here, around this time tomorrow, like he turns ka'et machar into 4 English words. Around, that's the ke. The 8, that's the time. The machar is tomorrow. The this, he adds in, just like Unclus added in Hadain. I will cause to rain down an exceedingly heavy hail, the like of which has never been in Egypt from the days of its founding until now. Barry and then Joel.
The question on the word hifasda, it was founded. What do we mean Egypt was founded? Why is the significance since Egypt was founded? I don't know what that means.
Yeah, it is an interesting question because it suggests that the Torah has an understanding of the beginnings of societies, the founding of countries. Like, is it referencing Pharaoh's dynasty, or is the Torah imagining a time when there wasn't an Egypt, all of a sudden there was an Egypt? It is an interesting phrase. I don't have a good answer, but it's a great question. Joel and then Tova, unless you want to respond to that point. Oh, okay, skip Tova the microphone, then Joel.
I don't know if this really reflects rabbinic understanding, but the idea of the founding of Egypt, the beginning, the creation of the two lands, the Egyptians' word for Egypt was Tawi, which means two lands. It's like the ayim suffix in the pair. And that was the Ma'aseh Rishit. That was the intended order of creation, was Tawi. And the ultimate indication of disaster was when the two lands were split and when that entity did not exist. So this is actually extremely apt to indicate utter disaster.
Do we have a sense of what they considered to be the geography of Tawi? Like, is it what?
Yeah, it's the delta was Lower Egypt, what they called the Kemet, the black land, because of the fertile soil, and Upper Egypt was what we would call Southern Egypt because they're doing the directionality of the Nile, right? And that was Deshret, the red land, because of the red sand desert. And the two of those
together. The Nile flows south?
The Nile flows north. But so they're saying from its origin to the south is Upper Egypt. They regard that as up. The first time they conquered, when Thutmose conquered into to the Euphrates and found a river flowing from the north, he was staggered.
I see.
Right?
So, because they weren't thinking north-south,
They weren't thinking
origin of Nile.
They were thinking origin of Nile, that's upper and lower. It's confusing to people all the time, but lower Egypt is the delta. Upper Egypt is the southern part of the Nile towards its origin.
And do we have a sense that geographically it was as big as the current state of Egypt? Like they experienced Egypt as far south as like the border of, I don't know, Eritrea?
The border, the southern border of Egypt, Sudan, what Sudan today, what was Nubia at the time, was always in contest. They regularly fought and conquered it. Nubia is from the Egyptian word nub, which means gold. That's why they were after it. It was a source of gold. Its southern border varied between what's called the first and I think the third cataracts going south. So it varied, but it did extend fairly far into that area, yeah.
Cataract as in
Cataract
waterfall?
as in rapids, like really rough.
That would have been really helpful to know yesterday.
Light going off right now.
So 3 of us in this room, and now Leonard, 4 of us in this room are in a nerdy daily trivia contest. And yesterday, there was a question about a word for a common medical disorder that also means a waterfall. And I was like, I have no idea. Yeah. Gosh, did you get it right, Joel? Yeah. Leonard, did you get it right?
I got a 0.
Yeah, I'm impressed, Joel. But that's incredible. I'd never heard of that before in my life, and it comes up today.
Rabbi?
It's extremely common talking about Egyptian history. You talk about the cataracts all the time.
Wow.
Rabbi?
I guess cascade. I never heard of a disease called cascade, but okay, that's unbelievable.
I have something on that subject.
Wait, Joel was going to say something before?
Another one, cataract.
All right. Leonard and then Norm.
I
hope you all are enjoying yourselves because we're finding this. Oh, Larry, you're here too. You're also there. Did you get it right?
Not only did I get it right, but Monday, Diane had cataract surgery.
Meaning she had a waterfall put in?
But we were actually talking about the origin of the word cataracts coming from waterfalls or rapids. And I just wanted to say about Upper Egypt, we always talk about going upriver without any consideration of directionality.
Yeah.
Upriver means going up toward where the flow is coming from.
Yeah. Great. How's she doing, Larry?
Oh, she's fine. She's teaching right now, which is why she's not here.
Okay.
And she's seeing colors like she never saw.
Amazing. That's a good sign. Okay, Leonard, Norm.
All right, I just wanted to point out that cataract, which does indeed mean waterfall in Latin, comes from Greek, and the meaning of the origin words there in Greek is to smash down.
Wow, this is very intertextual. Wow. Norm?
I have a question. Is it normal to give Pharaoh such a detailed advance warning of exactly what's going to happen? You know, he's been warned occasionally, but this time he seems to be getting really a detailed description of what is coming next if he doesn't repent quickly.
In different plagues, we talked about how Moses giving Pharaoh the opportunity to say, when do you want this plague to be removed? I think it was the frogs, right? Could be understood by Pharaoh to mean, I'm actually more important than I thought. They're allowing me to snap my fingers, and this is exactly when the plague's going to be over. Or it can be understood as, you know how powerful I am, Pharaoh? You want this gun at 7:08? Tell me, and I'll let it go at 7:08. So it's actually, it's a power game, right? So if you get to, the more detail you know, on the one level, the more prepared you can be. On the other level, the more you realize you are not in control. I'm in control. So it is a power game to control someone else's reality to that level of specificity. But you're right that it's not been happening all the time. And going back to what Marshall read about the drum beat, like this is getting bigger, right? We're talking about epic things that have ever happened in Egypt, and I'm going to tell you exactly when it's going to happen, and guess what? I'm not going to be off by a second, right? Rosemary?
I think as we are going closer to the bigger punishments, this is giving all the precision. So it prepares people psychologically to be more scared. When it says tomorrow at this time, it's at this time. People will wait for that. So already your nerves are in motion. Yes. And then there will be like something coming down, the hail you haven't seen, the country haven't existed, now it's going to happen. So all this is making the people more nervous, and they know that if they don't do, worse things will happen.
It creates an anticipatory anxiety. It reminds me, there's a wonderful midrash that Aviva Zornberg does a beautiful job expanding on in her book on Shemot, on the rationale or the explanation, at least the emotional, psychological explanation for the golden calf. The beginning of the golden calf begins with the Torah saying, Vayar ha'am ki boshesh Moshe, that the people saw that Moses was late or tarrying because he was up on the mountain talking to God, and it's in the absence of their leader that they become frenzied. So the Midrash says, and this is a game, but it's a meaningful game, don't read it as boshesh, which can also mean to be embarrassed, but it means here to tarry. It means ba-shesh. The people saw that it was shesh. What does shesh mean? Not 6 o'clock, but noon, right? 6 hours into the day, because he had told them, I'm going up and I'll be up there for 40 days. And they thought it meant exactly 40 days. So noon on the 40th day happened, and they went crazy. And the Midrash, and then Viva Zornberg expands it, like when a toddler or a young child expects their parent to come and they don't, a second later, they are out of their minds. I actually have memories of that, of waiting to be picked up from Hebrew school at a certain time. And if my mother was 2 minutes late, I was concerned there was some terrible accident, because you expect your mother to come back on time, right? And when you're expecting something, either good or bad, to happen, and it doesn't happen, it's crazy making. So the Midrash is, they saw it was Ba-Shesh. They were counting down the days and the hours and the minutes and the seconds. He wasn't there. He must not be coming. Oh my God, we're leaderless. We were brought out for no reason. Golden calf. It doesn't justify the sin, but it psychologically explains the sin. And so what you're talking about here is similar, but in the opposite emotional valence. I'm telling you, tick tock. Tomorrow, when? At this exact time, disaster. Right? Now, Ilan or someone had asked about, what does it mean about that exact time? Look what Rashi does with that. I think, Ilan, were you reading? Yeah. Okay.
Ka'et machar, ka'et hazot machar.
So the first thing Rashi does is say, I agree with Unkelus, and I'm going to put in a hazot. Unkelus put in hadain, at the time tomorrow, meaning at this time tomorrow. And now he expands on the this.
Sarat lo Srita bakotel.
Lisrot means to scratch or to create like a mark. So what did he do?
I made a mark on the wall.
He was in the old city of Jerusalem, and he went up to the kotel, and no, just sometimes a wall is just a wall. He made a mark on the wall, and think of the way a sundial works, like where the sun was at the time, okay? Like maybe where a shadow ended or something.
L'machar k'shetagia hama lachan yered habarad.
So tomorrow...
Yeah, when the sun hits this point, hail will come down.
Right, so it's more menacing. It's not just Barah is going to come down. You see this mark on the wall. You see where the sun's hitting it. I'm going to write it here. All day tomorrow, as you see the sun getting closer and closer and closer to this spot. Mr. Bond, right? Or Indiana Jones, right? When the sun comes through that. That's why the Raiders lost Ark, right? So it both gives Pharaoh maybe a chance to prepare. It also realizes that there's nothing he can. It's also it's a very powerful trope. It's Wizard of Oz, right? Is when the sand gets through that hourglass, that's when you're doomed. That I was frightening as a child. Like we knew exactly how many seconds Dorothy had to live. That was frightening, right? Similar kind of stuff.
It's also
a microphone, and then I see Rick's hand.
Oh, sorry. Just a small comment. It's also striking that the image is of sunlight marking the coming of hail. It's like the very opposite of it makes it even more powerful.
I thought you were going to say something. That is interesting. I thought you were going to say something different, that isn't there also a relationship between sun and a pharaonic understanding of divinity, right? So is this the Midrash saying, I, Moses, am going to use the very thing by which you associate your own divinity with to let you know that you're not nearly as divine as you think?
That's actually very good. I should have saw that.
Rick.
Hi. Along the lines of anxiety, going back to verse 14, the plagues are on his heart, el libcha. So it's not on his body, it's on his heart. And the kaved again reflects the heaviness of his heart and being weighed when he dies and all that kind of thing. So kaved is also a recurring theme. But I like that you said the anxiety upon their hearts and the inner turmoil.
Yeah, very good. There's an intensifying of, they didn't know the word psychology, but intensifying of the emotional toying that God and Moses are doing with Pharaoh. And once again, for the 10th time, none of this has yet been said to Pharaoh. This is all part of the warning, right? We're all in that extended sentence that God is telling Moses to say to Pharaoh. Okay, and that, by the way, continues at least to the next verse, but Rashi has one more thing to say, on this verb, on this verse, and we're probably not going to finish this today, but let's start it. It's another stream of verses where he's going to describe why it was hivazda rather than the root still having the yud. With your forbearance, Elon, let me read this just to go through it a little bit quicker. Okay, so first thing Rashi says on hivazda is shenit yasda. So he turns it into a word that retains the full root of Yud Samech Daled from when it was established, right? So the difference is Shenit Yasda is a verb and Hivazda is a gerund. So Hivazda, it's establishmenting. I know that's not an English word, but that's form. It's an ing. And so Rashi says, it's the same thing as if it was just put into the past tense of the hitpa'el, when it was established. Okay. Kol teva shetchila yesoda yud. This is the second time in 2 verses that Rashi's beginning a comment this way. Any root, teva, he uses several different words to mean root. We use shoresh, he says teva. Shetchilat yesoda, that the beginning of its shoresh, of its root, teva just means word. The word he's using for root here is yesod, which, by the way, is interesting, because that's the root of the word we're talking about. You notice that? Sometimes Rashi uses the word gizra to mean root, but here he uses the word yisod. That's the word in the verse that he's commenting on, but he's just doing that, I think, to be, playful.
Like foundation.
Foundation, right? So anytime the beginning letter of the yisod, of the root, is yud, kagon, like yasad, like that root, yasod, or yalad, giving birth, yadoa, knowing, yasar, which means to be, what's that? Removed, to be removed, yes, something like that. Oh, kshehi mit pa'elet, meaning when that root is reflexified, right, put into a reflexive or sometimes a passive form. Tavo havav, here comes the vav, bimkom hayud. He describes it kind of like, almost like a cartoon. Like the vav comes in and takes the yud that was in the root and removes the yud. Kamo hi vazda, like the root hi vazda, rather than hit yazda or something like that. And now we get hi valda. Now this is interesting. Rashi, on some level, assumes that his readers know everything and nothing. He assumes we know nothing because he's explaining basic concepts like, when the first letter of a root is a samech, a taf comes in. But he also assumes we know everything because he can just say the word hivalda, and he thinks we're going to know, I know exactly what that word is. That's not a verse he's quoting, he's quoting a word. And without an annotated version of Tanakh, we wouldn't know what he's referring to. What's he referring to? I happen to know it because it's from my bar mitzvah haftorah. I remember that word when I learned it from Parshat Bamidbar. So, share the screen. Hosea chapter 2. Penafshi tena aruma. I'm going to, lest I strip her naked, vihitzaktiha, and set her up, kiyom, on a day, Hivalda, that she was born, right? So it's a terrifying text, by the way. And this is God basically saying Israel has strayed and become a harlot, and I'm going to embarrass her and make her stand as naked as the day she was born, right? So that's an ancient image, not only a modern image. And if you look at Hivalda, it's not Yalda, but the root is Yalad, to give birth. But the form is Hivalda. Why Rashi thinks just by saying the word Hivalda, his readers will know this from the second chapter of Hosea, I don't know. Because it seems to me any reader that would know that would also know that the Yud comes and is replaced by the Vav. Joel? Microphone.
First you learn it by rote, and then you really understand it. So they learned it from their childhood by rote.
So that may be the oral tradition. Someone hears Hivalda, they know Haftorah from Abin Bar Hoshea
It's like
too.
when you're explaining a word, you bring something up from the liturgy, because we know it, but we don't really know what it means.
Yeah. Listen, I guess we can't really understand what it meant to live in the oral tradition where it was common that people knew the Tanakh by heart. Like it boggles the mind that was considered a common thing, that someone would say a word and they would know it. Marshall?
Since Joel mentioned the word liturgy, I just wanted to note that Rabbi Jules Harlow just died at the age of 92. And I mention it specifically because we've used his Sidur Sim Shalom for so many years.
Yeah.
And I noticed something this morning in the davening I hadn't noticed before.
Yeah.
That's something that you did. That in the Sidur itself, the prayer for the state of Israel, Simchat Olam Liyoshveha. And when you did your modification of that, you said Simchat Olam Lechol Yoshveha.
Yeah.
And really that what Harlow
Just
did was...
say that in English for people not getting it.
That give joy to the world, to its inhabitants. But what you added was to give joy to all of the inhabitants.
Of Israel,
Of Israel. And what Harlow did was, in his translation, he incorporated conservative movement theology into the Sidur itself.
Yeah. I'm glad you referenced that. Zichrono Levracha, Rabbi Jules Harlow, who was one of the great editors of Sidurim in our movement. I'll just tell you a cute story that was shared on a text chat that I'm in yesterday when we found out that he died, that Rabbi Harlow at one point visited a shul that we were davening at in New York City, and he was like a guest speaker or something, and at the Kiddush, we were like pouring l'chaims. My friend Rabbi David Kalb, who was a rabbi, lifted up a shot glass and said, "To liturgy," because that's what Rabbi Harlow had devoted his life to. But I think it's the only time in history that someone said a l'chaim to liturgy. So Rabbi Jules Harlow, may your memory be a blessing. May you rest in peace. I will stop here because we're after 9:31. We're in the middle of, there's like 3 or more of those where he brings roots that begin with a yud, where the yud is disappeared by the vav. Have a good day, everybody.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.